Hey guys, welcome back to the Anchor of the Week. This is Sadie.
And this is Courtney.
And this is part 2 of a conversation that we had with Mansi.
Yes, so if you haven't listened to our last episode, make sure you go back, listen to that, because we'll be diving into the middle of this amazing conversation.
Yes, let's get going.
Ignoring the negative in the world or the
Yeah.
suffering that others experience because you think, well, karma is active and they, did bad in their past lives, and so they are just reaping those consequences now, which is a really horrible way, I guess, to view things, but it does make you feel less guilty about not doing more yourself or the life that you have. Yeah.
Wow, and that goes back to the whole unattainable, I should do more, you know what I mean? Or I feel guilty for not doing more.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah.
So, okay, so then you're there. Are you living by yourself at this point? Are you still with your parents?
No, living at home with my mum, dad and sister. And so as the weeks go on, just having more time to reflect on the past 4 years, think about all of these teachings, because again, I think the contradictory nature of them was just coming into focus a lot more. Because all these teachers say different things, and I'd just really given it my all in terms of effort and time. I'd read so many books, watched so many YouTube videos, and invested so much of myself into all of these beliefs, and it wasn't a lack of trying or a lack of effort. And so it just felt wow, this isn't even, I don't think this is even it. And at the same time, I felt like my mental health was worsening in lockdown, being the time that it was, just feeling a lot more fear and depression. And then probably come July and August, I'm really just at my lowest. And because of the lockdown restrictions and talks about other things happening in the world, it was just
and Australia was very tense.
Yeah,
right?
it was. Yeah, we had a lot of protests and there were just a lot of restrictions. And the lockdown itself was very hard. So there'd be helicopters patrolling your neighborhood, and you could only go for one walk a day, and it was really monitored. And yeah, so there were 2 or 3 weeks in particular that it got very dark and low, where I was just don't want to be here. The thought of living is just unbearable. And I'd pretty much decided or knew that my New Age beliefs weren't real, or that they couldn't be real just because of all of the contradiction and confusion and the bad fruit. And so I was well, what is real then? Because I know that there is spiritual power. And at the same time, this didn't help, but I was learning more about spiritual darkness and the darker powers of this world and spiritual warfare. Because that is also a world of study in the New Age. And so learning about this and being okay, whoa, this is a thing. And this is terrifying. And what's above that? If there's spiritual darkness, what's above that or beyond that? Is there anything? And I had my last psychic reading, I think maybe at the end of August, and it was a total baloney.
Did you do it online?
It was online on Zoom. The guy was in Hawaii.
Nice.
And so then it was one night in particular where I prayed, and I don't think I'd prayed since I was a child, and I got on my knees specifically, which I hadn't done maybe ever. And I said something like, God, if you're real, I want to know who you are. I just want to know what the truth is. And if you show me what the truth is, I'll lay down my whole life for you and follow you. And it was a really heartfelt prayer, and nothing crazy happened that night or massively supernatural. I did feel, I think, a sense of a bit of warmth or just a bit of relief. And then for the next couple of weeks, maybe prayed that once or twice more. And then during this time, there were a lot of New Age accounts that were turning to Christ. And initially it made my skin crawl, and I thought they were being deceived and that they had gone mad.
Wow.
And this could have even been a bit before my prayer that I was seeing these people talk about Jesus. And they were sharing scriptures, and I would read these scriptures and be okay, this is kind of nice. This sounds good. I didn't know Jesus said this thing or that thing. The Bible said certain things, and I was I'm a bit surprised. And then, yes, the way these New Ages or ex-New Ages were explaining it, it was just perfect because they knew they were in it. They knew how to explain things in a certain way, and like
Right.
they just had like the perfect answers to things, and the things that they were saying were really just like convicting and eye-opening, and it just was like, wow, okay, this is really hard to ignore or hard to write off as like they're going crazy, because they were making more sense than anything. Like, yeah. And so at this time, also sharing their positive experiences of like, wow, I feel so free and peaceful now. They were talking about how in the New Age you're in this rhythm of ups and downs where you feel these massive highs and massive lows because you're kept on a hamster wheel of trying to do these works to, you know, attain spiritual enlightenment. And so they were talking about that whole side of it. And it was just like they'd taken something out of my mind, like my experience, and were saying it back to me. And I was just like, whoa, they're experiencing this as well. And so, yes, at this time, I just had more of a thirst to learn more about Jesus. And so I started to read the Bible, and I started in Genesis, which is a bit random, but I thought might as well start at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, like I would never have thought I'd read the Bible in a million years, but there I was. And I was fascinated by it. I was like, whoa, this is incredible. Like the creation story, God creating the world, creating Adam and then Eve. And then I was reading about the serpent tempting Eve. And like the three things he says to the both of them, like it just made my jaw drop of like, you know, God hasn't told you that that you can live or you will live forever, and that you can become like him if you eat this fruit. And there's a third lie that you're, I don't know, but even just those two lies of like you will live forever and you'll become like him, it was like a jaw drop moment, because in the New Age you believe that you'll just go on living forever with reincarnation. And that there's just no end to your soul, that your soul is infinite and limitless. And then you believe that you can become like God, because there's another whole realm of the New Age where you talk about like the ascension of your soul and how your soul can go through levels of like, say in this lifetime, you go through certain kind of things and your soul can kind of become more advanced. And then in the next lifetime, you'll become more enlightened and more advanced. And so you call that ascension.
Right.
And it's a process of, I guess, becoming more like God or becoming God. And so just seeing that in the Bible, I was like, whoa, these lies have been around since the beginning of time. Just remixed now into this like, you know, weird quantum physics package. Like,
isn't that interesting in and of itself, though?
Yeah.
Like you reading that, realizing like
exactly
what you have been told was like the original lie.
Exactly. Yeah. And so just really fascinated, kept reading and reading. Was reading through, like, you know, when you just flip through and like land on pages and read stuff. So I was just doing that. That was my strategy. And again,
sometimes it works well.
It works well in this case. And again, really liking what I was seeing. So like in the Psalms and in Isaiah and the New Testament, and reading like the book of John. And so I was like, well, this is unexpected. Didn't expect this to happen in 2021 for me to be reading the Bible and enjoying it. But I obviously still had a lot of questions. And I was still also like speaking to God and being like, okay, like I think you are real. Like I think that you are, like Jesus is God, but I just have a lot of doubt and question still. Can you please just help me to answer these questions and give me clarity? And I kept, I think, just saying that prayer of like, I want to follow you. I do want to know the truth, but I have questions. Can you please help me? And I think just having that prayer is so kind of instrumental in God. Just he's so happy to have your questions and to give you that clarity and understanding. And so I would just Google my questions or like search them on YouTube and watch videos of like the explanations. And then at the same time, I messaged a girl, the only Christian girl that I knew, who I went to uni with. We weren't friends or anything. She wasn't close to me. And I said like, hey, this is really random, but I think I'm becoming a Christian. Like, can you talk to me? Or like, I've got some questions. And so she was obviously really excited and was like, yes. And so we had a call, which is 3 years to this day that we had that call.
Wow.
I know, literally. And so we talked for like 2 hours on the phone in lockdown, and she just explained a lot. I shared a lot. And at the end of the call, we prayed And I guess that's kind of like where I gave my life to God in that call. And yes, and so what followed for the next few weeks is just me continuing to watch a lot of YouTube videos, like for literally several hours every single day of like sermons, evidence for Christianity, and looking at like just anything and everything that crossed my mind that I'd want to learn about or ask God about. I would just watch videos on that.
Which is so fascinating because you started, right, as a young kid, like watching videos
exactly.
disproving Christianity.
Yeah.
So the 360 or 180, I don't know.
Yeah.
180, not 360.
I don't know that, but yeah, exactly. And so I think just even back when I was younger and I was watching those debates, it wasn't even like I was looking at evidence that disproved Christianity, because the evidence for Christianity is so strong. It's undeniable. And that's also the turning point that I had, where I was looking at all of these things and just going like, okay, if I have to be really intellectually honest with myself, I can't deny what I'm seeing in the evidence. Like even within scripture, not just like historical evidence for the resurrection and like archaeological findings, but even within scripture, like in Psalm 22 or 23, where it says the Messiah's hands and feet are pierced. And that was even before crucifixion was invented, like the 1,000 years before Jesus was born, 600 years before crucifixion was invented, and the way he dies is predicted, things like that. You know, the hundreds of prophecies about Jesus the Messiah, like all of these things. I was like, okay, I can't deny this. Like it's actually more foolish if I was to deny this. And looking at,
crazy.
I know,
like,
exactly.
The complete 180, literally. It's crazy.
And at the same time, I didn't want to leave any stone unturned, so I'd look at videos on Islam and Judaism, but there's just no comparison in terms of like the teachings and the fruit, even in terms of the Bible's teachings on like righteousness and goodness, because that was my big gripe in the New Age as well, was the lack of like teaching on like how to be a good person or like what to do to help people.
Really?
But kind of, it's more like be positive, ignore, you know, people are going through their own bad karma, like that kind of thing.
Okay, because I feel like that's such a, or like, I don't know, maybe that's how it's marketed a lot, is like, just be a good person, as long as you're a good person.
But like a good person for yourself, basically.
Exactly, that's like, the motive, is to get your own good karma or like to increase your ability to manifest things.
It's a lot of just like self-preservation. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so the first time I heard the gospel presented really well was also a turning point, because even in my first few weeks, I never kind of got, or it never clicked why Jesus had to die for me, and why or how I was a sinner. I was like, okay, God, like, I don't really understand. And then when I heard the gospel presented really well, I just broke down crying for like 20 minutes because I was like, whoa, I get it now. Like, this makes so much sense. And within this time, God was working on my heart a lot and my emotions and mind a lot. My kind of anxiety and depression pretty much just vanished in that period of time. Like the first thing he gave me was peace, like a really deep, unshakable peace. And I would feel his presence even just in my bedroom alone all the time. I would just like weep in the presence of God. And I'd never done that when I was, you know, connecting with my so-called spirit guides or angels. Never felt that kind of like presence or definitely not peace.
Like that safety, like to be able to cry, to
exactly
do that kind of stuff. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
I also love what you were saying earlier. It's funny to say I love what you're saying about the dark spirits, but like this, because I have heard this many times actually from, I mean, New Age people, but I've listened to podcasts of just random people, celebrities, whoever, who have like found God through this means of going down the really dark path. Or like there's a celebrity I listened to a podcast, and he said that when he was in Hollywood for a season, like he really learned a lot about just the devil and how the devil works, especially in that industry. And how through that he was like, okay, if there's this kind of evil, then there must be a good God, you know? And I don't know if you like can talk on that. I don't know if you have like people that you know, or even you said you didn't go that far down. But like, I don't know. I'm
it's
super
a good point
actually.
So I think at the end of my time in the New Age, like I mentioned, when I was learning more about like spiritual warfare and spiritual darkness, like I never like practiced any of that myself, but just learning about it and seeing the sorts of like rituals that Satanists do, and like how a lot of that is like done in Hollywood and like the powers of this world, it was just really sickening actually, and that kind of just added to my feelings of fear. Just to even read about it was like, oh my gosh, this is so disturbing.
And is that presented to you like from New Agers, as in like this is reality, or was it more of like, because I hear that and I'm like, oh, someone's trying to like expose the darkness, you know what I mean? True, or was it presented to you in either even a neutral way?
Oh, I see. Or definitely in a bad way. So like there are some groups, I guess the New Age is such a huge realm, but like there are some kind of sects or groups within it where they think they're exposing spiritual darkness, and so they are deceived, but they are still exposing like, so like obviously they're in the darkness, but they're exposing like greater darkness, if that makes sense. It's sort of like if
something further down the line almost.
Like one denomination exposing another denomination, to use an analogy like that. So that's kind of how I learned about it. And it's not kind of like talked about in a positive way. It is like, oh, this is a bad thing, stay away from this.
Okay, fair.
But it's funny 'cause it's like the way they're teaching you how to like combat it or like stay away from it is still in the realm of darkness.
Yes, exactly. It's not like turn to God, turn to your creator. It's like turn to yourself.
Right.
Oh,
you can fight it off.
Interesting. Lord, so crazy.
Crazy.
Interesting.
Okay. I'm loving this. I'm just like,
it's just a lot to digest.
It is a lot to digest. I'm like thinking about this too. Like as you're sharing this, like, are you like excited to share it, or does it feel like heavy to almost go back over these things, or have you kind of, or does it depend?
I think or it's like a little bit of both. Like I'm really happy to expose it and talk about it, especially because it glorifies God and He gets the glory in like my transformation and like just what He's done in my life, and I get to share. I get to like boast in Christ and be like, I'm a new creation. I feel so loved now. I feel so peaceful. Like what I receive from Jesus every day is like just unfathomable. Like the love, the joy. But I think in terms of talking about like the darker parts of the past, part of it feels kind of removed from my memory because it was a while ago, and I just feel like I do have such a new life now that I'm like, oh, like that was a thing in my past. That was a bit of a plot twist, but I don't know. I don't feel too bad, I guess. I think God also has just redeemed it in the sense of like I don't have like the guilt and shame attached to it.
So good.
I think I did at the start a bit of feeling like so heavy of like, oh, I was deceiving others as well. But that kind of guilt and shame is gone. Like,
Okay, and so that kind of leads me into something else as well, because I mean, you've had a lot of drastic worldview turns.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like even from like atheist to like something that even Christians would be like, oh, too spiritual.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So something almost uber spiritual where like you're so aware of like the spiritual realm and things.
Yeah.
And then obviously from New Age to Christianity, right? Like, and as you even said, right? Like at beginning, like you kind of were like, I don't know, wrestling with what you had done, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So my question is like I guess the different times that you've changed worldviews, and of course focus on whichever part of it you want to the most. But like, what is that like? Because I've had the same worldview my entire life. It's just been refined.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Or things have like focused it more, maybe. But I've always been the worldview of there is a God and He is good.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And that was like always like the baseline. So everything that I viewed or that has happened was viewed through that, you know? But what is it like? And I feel like maybe a lot of people can relate to this as well, of like you change your worldview so drastically.
Yeah.
But like surely your mind is not all of a sudden like, okay, now I think a complete new way and I'm like, okay, turn page.
Yes. Like it's just like a magic
thing.
Exactly.
So what is it like to realize or adopt a new belief, but you're not like fully out of maybe the older one, you know, like that transition period that I've never asked this question before.
That's a great question.
Nor have I ever really thought about it, you know?
Yeah, so I can directly see how the emotions and thoughts and mindsets that I had correlated to what I believed. So like when I was an atheist, it was the darkest. And then when I was into New Age spirituality, I still had, you know, waves of depression and anxiety, but I did feel kind of like positive, happy at a surface level. And now being Christian is the most mentally healthy I've been. It's the most, it is literally the only time I felt like a really deep, long-lasting peace. And I guess because it's been 3 years, I can say that now. It's not just been 2 months, but that deep peace hasn't left me, even though I can still get stressed and sad. and life is life. Like you still just do have the love of God that doesn't leave you.
Yeah.
And it's just like the fruit speaks for itself. I think that is the bottom line. Like good trees produce good fruit, bad trees produce bad fruit. And so you can really see how like my phases of like mindsets just correlated to what I believed in. But I think when I became a Christian, it wasn't like I instantly was just like, okay, like I now have all of these new political beliefs or like new like social topic beliefs. Like that also came with time. Like it didn't take years and years, but like in the first few weeks and months, I would look up questions or just ask God about certain things. And yeah, I just really had to humble myself and be like, okay, I am not the creator of the universe or the smartest being in the world. Like I have to be open to being wrong and relearning everything I know. Like, and it's massively humbling, but that's the only way to go about it. Like, and even at the time itself, I was like to God, okay, like I have these questions, but I do realize that you are smarter, you are greater, and I just want to know what you think. And so it was a lot of relearning, but massively worth it. And then there is a part of it that's spiritual where you receive the Holy Spirit. And so your thoughts are just, there is a supernatural element to which like the beliefs I have now, I don't think it came through just like research and toiling and having to convince myself. It was also supernatural to an extent, but also just that humbling and openness of like, okay, Lord, I just want to know what the truth is. And that's what I asked on day one. And like, I've got to stick to that promise and be like, I'll follow you no matter what, even if I think I disagree or like my little human self is like, oh, like, why is this a thing or that a thing? And
And I think, I don't know, I have no idea who's going to be listening to this podcast. But even just the whole concept of like, maybe people are afraid to like change their worldview, but like it's okay to like admit that like you have to unlearn some things.
And that you're wrong. Like, and that possibly everything about what you believe in is wrong. Like, and that like it is kind of, I think, quite scary. Like to be like, whoa, like all of these friends that I have, I now believe the opposite of what they believe in. So it's definitely, I guess, on a like practical level, that can be quite tricky to navigate. And then friends being like, oh, like you're a Christian now, like why? Or like having that. But again, I think it's short-lived. Like with my family, they were like, oh, okay, sure, like you do you. Yeah.
Interesting. Are you still friends with some of like
New absolutely. Friends? Oh, New Age friends. I only had 2 friends in real life that were in the New Age, and so I stayed in touch with one of them. And then the other one just unfollowed me on everything. I guess it was too much for her to even see. I guess it really makes like the darkness tremble, and it kind of like repels you for a reason. And then the other person, just we lost touch, so it wasn't anything kind of serious. But
just like that.
But then in terms of online friends, there are a few people who saw what I was posting when I came to Christ, and even came to Christ themselves, and were like, I've looked at what you've been posting and I wanted to see if it was true, or I wanted to see like what would happen if I started to pray or whatever, and now I'm a Christian.
Wow.
That's crazy. So that was incredible to see.
So my question now is, if we're ready to kind of like move on a little bit, but like even like between this, we were just talking about like, how do you even talk to people now about this, right? Because it's like, okay, you have your amazing story. This is great. We're learning so much, you know, but then it's like, okay, like now the rubber meets the road, and now we go into the world that has adopted so much of New Age, even thinking without even knowing it, or people that wouldn't call themselves New Age, but again, it's kind of like, well, everything is love and
spiritual. I have,
I just go off good vibrations. You know, and like, how do we even sort of
have those conversations and answer those questions?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think the first thing is to be prepared. I think there's an element of it where we can be prepared and bring God into it and ask God how to respond to these things. Go and watch a lot of like videos of ex-New Agers who've turned to Christ and what they're saying, and just genuinely like have just like things in your back pocket that you kind of just like learn, not necessarily memorize, but just that you have some vague or like general answers when they say like, well, I just believe in energy. Like, I don't believe there's just like one creator or one God. And then you can have something that you've prepared to answer that. So we were saying in the little break that was a turning point for me to realize and believe that there is one creator and he's a personal being. It's not just energy that has become what the world is now. And looking into that, I would look at how, so the Big Bang, actually, no, I won't go into that. I've forgotten. There was like a whole thing where I actually had, like, when I was in my YouTube era, when I was coming to Christ, where I would even look up kind of videos that were like, is God even real? Evidence for God itself. Not even any specific faith or religion, but like just the concept of God, looking into that and starting at that ground level of like, okay, is there a creator? Is it just energy? And researching that. And that was like step one. And then it was like all these different things. So like even looking into that, like you guys obviously believe in God, but just going and watching these videos or like reading books on it where they can explain it and you can just have responses. Wow. Because and
a level of understanding, I think, because I think it's so far from those of us that grew up in the Christian worldview to even like, I can't even think about having that worldview because it just does not make sense to me, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we can very easily kind of like repel people or just kind of be like, well, you're wrong. Yeah. Right? Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
But understanding that this is somebody else's worldview.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? And us just looking down on it or being like, well, that's dumb.
Well, let me be argumentative about it. Like, no, it has to come from like this place of like understanding, you know, of like,
this is how you view the world.
Exactly. Like, help me. I want to know. Like,
exactly. Yeah. And then the other thing, which is maybe, or like just more important, is just to just talk about your own experiences and just ask some questions and be like, do you feel peace with what you believe in? Like, do you actually feel like a long-lasting peace? How does your belief system make you feel? So our receptionist in our building is Muslim, and we had a great conversation with him about our faiths and God. And so I didn't even want to go into the realm of like, here's all the evidence and like all of the apologetic side of it, but like just asking him like, how does your faith make you feel? Like, do you feel loved by God? Would you call yourself a child of God? And he was like, no, I'm not a child of God. Like, we don't believe that. We believe we're slaves of God. And so even that plants so much of a deeper seed, I think, because I forgot to say, but part of my story, so maybe 10 months before I became a Christian, the girl who I mentioned I reached out to in lockdown over the phone, I had a train ride home with her and we're just chatting about our beliefs, maybe just for 5 or 10 minutes. And one thing she said was, I know I'm always going to be okay because I'm always in the palm of God's hands, something along those lines. And it made me feel a bit emotional at the time, and I didn't know why, and I even said that to her. And this was when I was deeply in the New Age, and I think it was because I just felt this pang of like jealousy and sadness that I'd never felt. Like I was in the palm of anyone's hands. I'd never felt that kind of safety. And that one line from her was like, boom. Yeah. And I did go home and kind of just be like, whatever. But like then 9-10 months on, remembered that, reached out to her. And so I think exactly. So just saying like nuggets like that to these people and these people, just people that you encounter is often more powerful than whipping out like a thesis on the evidence for God and just sharing snippets of your testimony. If you've got one or something amazing that God's done for you, or just how you feel so at peace in your life and what your faith has done for you. And I think that's often more memorable and powerful.
I was gonna say I'm satisfied. That's such a weird word, but like it's just been honestly such a good conversation.
Thank you. I've loved it. It's been amazing.
Oh, thank you. Genuinely, like
I think you're being so open and honest, and I think like like again, I said I've had a lot of this conversation with you, but I still feel like I learn so much, and I think there's
I'm glad.
us just sharing our stories. You know, just it impacts people. You know,
and that's what like I guess like shakes the kingdom of darkness when we all share our testimonies, and like that's how people come to Christ as well. Because when I was in that again YouTube era, I was watching a lot of people's testimonies, and that as well was like absolutely instrumental and incredible in seeing how God moves, how God is real, how Jesus is God, because it was like these testimonies don't really come from other belief systems of like healings, miracles, feeling loved, feeling peace. And so I think there's so much power in just sharing your own story.
Absolutely.
So good.
And I highly recommend, as I said, people that have grown up Christian to actually listen to those, because I feel like sometimes we just take it so much for granted because you just always believe that, or this has always been my worldview. But like Yeah, it's crazy. And hopefully people felt this listening to this.
Yes,
like.
yes.
No, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure to just chat and like talk openly.
That's great. Hey, thanks for being one of our friends. That keeps us anchored.
Yes. Great fun.
Yeah, thank you. We're really pushing hard for this rebrand.
Yes. Yep.
But yeah, thank you so much, Mansi. And thanks to everyone who's watching, who's listening. But yeah, we will catch you next time on the Anchor of the Week.
Bye.